Excellent. Thank you so much, Artem, for that introduction and for inviting me to be here in the first place. I'm delighted to be here. I've actually, with that introduction, one thing that didn't come out is that I've actually lived in England for 13 years. So even though I'm a foreigner, I have gotten to know the UK a bit, and I've found that being an outsider actually kind of allows me license to say things out loud or see things slightly differently. And that's kind of an interesting perspective at this moment when we're talking about signs of life in the geothermal sector. So I'll start by talking about GeothermEx a little bit. I'm working for them since 1 year ago. And this company is actually the longest running geothermal exclusive consultancy in the world. It's been going for 50 years, celebrating number 50 this year, headquartered in California, but projects all over the world. So the little dots show, most of the locations where we've been working. And historically, we've been focused on power, geothermal powered generation, but we also have the scope of services that GeothermEx provides are anywhere from greenfield exploration up to troubleshooting and remediation of geothermal fields. GeothermEx was actually bought by Schlumberger in 2010, and now SLB. And Schlumberger did a strange thing, which was let them alone, let them just stay to the side and keep doing their thing. And it's really just been the past year or so that things have started to evolve a bit with the evolution of the SLB New Energy division and things starting to kind of evolve in the space. So, SLB has its own legacy and strengths in subsurface knowledge and technology and all that good stuff that is applicable for geothermal as well. We have a sort of sister company that spun up a different way. It was started by some Schlumberger employees called Celsius Energy. I mentioned them because they've been working on the shallow side of geothermal, whereas GeothermEx has been traditionally, historically, more focused on the deep. So if we just take a moment to look at geothermal in general, this is where we see that actually the one word geothermal is used in a lot of different contexts and refers to a lot of different solutions and technologies. What I'm showing here is just a kind of portfolio of different technologies and applications and their relative depths. And what we have on the far left is the heat pump, ground source heat pump, geothermal heat pump, geoenergy. It's called a lot of things. This is another kind of facet of the geothermal industry, is that the terminology is a little bit confusing, but with that in mind, it's okay. So we have the shallow stuff, and then we have the really deep hydrothermal is what it's normally called, and that's for power generation. And then you have a whole bunch of different, permutations of that. This diagram is often used to talk about the correlation between temperature and application. And what I want to point out here is that on the high temperatures at the top, that's where you use geothermal energy for power generation. And then you can do plenty of things with, you don't have to have super high temperatures to do useful things. That's the point. Even though it's kind of a funny slide with animations or, cartoony things. I just want to draw your attention to these temperatures of, 40 to 60 degrees C. You can do plenty of useful things. And more are being thought of every day. In fact, yesterday I read about this sewer sludge, ultra dehydration of sewer sludge. That I thought, that's a great idea. It's, waste, make it smaller, burn it. So when we look at the global renewable energy story, at least with these three sources of energy, we see that geothermal started quite a while ago in the early 80s and has had this steady, stable around 3% growth. And that's despite advances in technology, fluctuations of price. A lot has happened in those decades, and still the growth is slow and stable. Whereas in the mid-90s, we saw wind just come up out of nowhere and grow exponentially. And then a decade later, we saw the same with solar. So we're all hoping that the trajectory starts to hockey stick like the other ones. And that's what we're looking for, is indications that that's about to happen. That would be great. So when we look at Europe in general, this is a map showing the temperatures at 2 kilometers depth. And the sections that are white are just lack of data. It's not anything else. Right now, there's a huge growth of geothermal activity throughout Europe. Huge number of projects of all types of both power and heat and lithium and Europe. There's a lot going on. And what I want to point out here is that when you look at the temperatures at 2 kilometers depth, the temperatures on the British Isles aren't that dissimilar from the temperatures in Europe. One exception to that is down here in Italy, where where Larderello is the birthplace of geothermal power, and so you have some anomalies in Italy, and then Turkey is a complete different story over there, but that's what we have. So it's about the same rocks. We have the same. We're not dissimilar from the continent, and yet when it comes to the legislation, what we have seen is that our neighbors have taken some really bold actions to enable geothermal development. In France, and things have happened pretty quickly over the past couple years. This is where France has this new plan that they just released in February, where it calls out specifically both the surface or shallow and deep geothermal energy, and it's very structured and ambitious. And as soon as they announced this, that led to one of the energy companies committing to develop a huge, 1.5 terawatts of geothermal energy in France itself. So then that led to a spinning, a discussion between that company and all the drilling providers in France, going, do you have any rigs? What's your availability? We're going to be busy. So that's a really exciting sign of life over there in France. In Netherlands, that's another country that has been really active, has been doing a lot of development in geothermal. Right here, this is showing, it's actually called the SCAN program. It's a seismic campaign of the Netherlands, where they did first a nationwide study and found some reservoirs, some geologic units that they thought would be good reservoirs. They did some testing, and now they're doing mapping to find where those sweet spots are, with the intention of using that heat for agriculture and storage, and they're very organized. Germany also has committed to generate 50% of the heat in a climate neutral way by 2030, and they have this 100 new projects, and that's in addition to their, already had quite a few projects on the go, and so this 100 well project is getting a lot of attention. So here in the UK, the legislation, we haven't seen those same things, at least not yet. What we're looking at here is just kind of standing back, looking at the island and the subsurface temperature at 1 kilometer depth, and then the heat flow of the same area. But what you're seeing here is the temperature's variation through the island, but the heat flow is what jumps out is actually the change of rock type. And that's where you have high heat flows in the granites. So the Cornish Peninsula has a high heat flow, and as does the north of England and up in Scotland a bit. And then the map of the geologic map by BGS is next to it, so you can sort of cross your eyes and see that the units match up. So you have the sedimentary basins, mainly in the middle, in kind of central England and southern England, and then the granites down south and up above. So just a little bit of this is an incomplete history of the topic in the UK, but what I want to point out is that over the 50 years, then what was driving a lot of activity in the late 70s through the mid 90s was this hot dry rocks program that was funded by the UK Department of Energy, which is now no longer in existence. But that Department of Energy that worked actually with the US Department of Energy, they had this big program in Cornwall to experiment with drilling geothermal wells and injecting cold fluid and seeing the response in a nearby producing well, and doing a lot of experimentation with that. During that time is when the first and still only district heating system in the UK was established. That's the Southampton Geothermal Heating Company, which is still going today apparently. And then you can see that there's just this dead zone from the mid 90s through the late 2000s, and which is where the wind and the solar, everything was taking off. Nobody really seemed to care about geothermal, but then things started to pick up again. And so we're starting to see a flurry of activity starting about 10, 15 years ago that then is starting to take off now. So now we get into the true signs of life, where we have the lithium brines, although, and I mentioned this first because this has gotten the most excitement. This has had the most publicity, and there's a lot of energy around it. It's a really exciting frontier, especially in the context of energy security and the move to electrify everything. So it's kind of this, crossroads of a bunch of different factors coming together. So we see activity with geothermal lithium in geothermal brines down in Cornwall, also up in the north of England. And then there's always this sort of knowledge sharing that goes back and forth with the Rhine Graben, which is between Germany and France, a lot of the projects, and that goes back to the Hot Dry Rocks days, because that program ended up kind of moving to the Rhine-Graben, and so that knowledge. So the, I guess, expertise with brines and geothermal in this type of setting, granitic setting, has been kept alive and kind of incubated in a way over in Europe, and now we're getting it going here in England. So another frontier that is super exciting is the abandoned coal mines. This is where the Coal Authority has been really busy looking at a bunch of different mines. This is their first one that just came online at the end of February, and it's a abandoned coal mine. And what they've done is drilled some boreholes and set it up so that they're pumping warm water up from a deep seam, and then it's going into their heat exchanger, and they're boosting the temperature and then delivering the hot water to buildings, and then taking the cold water out and pumping it back down to a different seam that is, at a shallower temperature. And so getting that system working, I believe, was several, years of work, and it took a lot of research and experimentation to do that. But now it's working and it's live. And this is just really interesting to me. And actually, I found out that they've started a second project up in Sunderland at the football stadium, where there happens to be a abandoned mine just on the grounds. So they've started this heat network scale using this old mine water. And actually, along kind of sponsored by or part of the same mine water use knowledge base, has been on one of the PhD students developed this map of Scotland, and it's just been published. And this is where, even though we know about the Gateshead colliery and the Sunderland one that's coming, this is actually, taking it to scale up. How many mines are there? Where is the water level? How easy is it going to be to, make it useful? And I'm also told that the Welsh government approached the Coal Authority to do the same thing in Wales. So that's quite exciting. And that's the mining story. So then we also have a bunch of development over in the hydrocarbon world. So the old oil and gas sector of the UK, where most of the expertise and activity is really on the offshore oil and gas. But actually there's a bit onshore. And I've listed some of the companies who've been active in this sector, and what they're focused on is repurposing oil and gas wells. So CeraPhi shared these slides with me. He just presented at a different conference a couple days ago. But this shows really what the offer is, and this has huge possibilities for making use of old infrastructure. That's one of the trends that we're seeing. So, you have an old well. It costs money to properly decommission it. So instead, you can do some integrity checks, do the pull the production lining and plug it, and then install their special hanger, their special contraption in the well, and just get the warm water, get the heat out of the water and use that. And then over time, because it's just a single well, it's just using conduction, then over time it will deplete and at some point there will be an end of life, and they're obliged to, return it to the green field in the approved site. So this model is really interesting, and they have some field trials that are going on right now, somewhere in England. So this is definitely a sign of life. It's this whole direction of repurposing hydrocarbon wells. There's also this idea of repurposing offshore oil wells, which is interesting too, to see if it works, and maybe provide power or heat and cool the facility itself, even though it would be also producing oil from its wells, but convert one of the wells to geothermal. So that's a live pilot project right now in the North Sea. And then we have, outside of those two industries I mentioned, we also have the kind of government bodies of science and innovation, like the British Geological Survey, where they're doing important things too. They just did this mapping project where they found all of the, I actually don't remember how they did it, but they have mapped the Carboniferous limestones, because they believe that that's really, in fact, it's similar to the Dutch example, where they had kind of honed in on this particular reservoir, this unit that they're tracking across the country and going, if we just find the sweet spots where this particular layer is at this depth, we'll have the right kind of conditions to exploit. And that's what, it sounds like that's what the BGS is doing right now, which is really exciting. And they are just in the final stages of publishing this UK Deep Geothermal Energy White Paper. So that's kind of a coming soon thing. And then thirdly, they're reworking legacy data sets. This is really important, and this is another trend that we see, and it's another really powerful avenue to pursue that is going to require geoscientific knowledge. So in addition to BGS, we also have these UK geoenergy observatories scattered around. There's two main ones. The one up in Glasgow, this is the one in Glasgow that has 12 boreholes. And then this is the Cheshire site. So, and then there's something in Cardiff that's more focused on urban geothermal heat exchangers and the water, the kind of fluid, the water flow in an urban setting with regards to geothermal heat recovery. So that's also cool. And then there's the Net Zero Technology Centre up in Aberdeen, which has, I think it was about 6 months ago, decided to start this National Geothermal Innovation Centre. So it hasn't gotten off the ground yet. It's just been planning meetings and interested parties, kind of getting around the table to talk about what it should do and so forth. But that's a great sign of life. And then this was interesting. Down in Cornwall was this airborne EM reconnaissance survey that they did. It was on the BBC News. This metal detector in the sky showing this helicopter flying. I think it flew at 80 meters above the ground, and just collecting airborne EM data that gives you information about variations in the conductivity, and you overlay that with the geology, and then you're able to really have a different measurement of the Earth that is difficult to get otherwise. So that's a really inspiring little project there. And then we have the whole world of building, heating, and cooling. Now this example, this is the Celsius Energy flagship project, which is actually in France. but they're in the process of converting one of the UK technology centers to also have this design, which is a splay of boreholes that come underneath, and it's all the transfer of heating and cooling and heat pumps and building temperature regulation. And this is really exciting. There's also but it's not that what's the word, unique in a way, because ground source heat pumps have been around for a long time, and there's other examples of buildings that are using ground source heat pumps, but in a kind of deeper or smarter way. So this World Wildlife Fund, not World Wrestling Federation, that's something else, but it's Living Planet Center in Woking. I don't think it's actually open yet. I think they're still in the development. Maybe somebody here knows more about it. But so anyway, this caught my eye as something that is, a great example. And then we have this fun idea by Town Rock Energy of just taking dancers' body heat and storing that, using it to ventilate or provide heating and cooling in the building. So that's actually live. It came online in, I think, October last year, and someday I'm going to go there. That's my next trip. And then there's this one. This is the first geothermally heated pool of its kind in the UK. I'm hoping that my village will decide to do this, but we're not on the coast actually. But this one, they have it's seawater comes in, and then they heat it geothermally with a single geothermal well. And it's not all, I think this picture is maybe a little misleading. I don't think the whole pool, they have a couple pools. They have a big pool, and then they have a geothermal pool. But you can buy tickets and you can go swim in, and it all sounds like a really good idea. Then there's the Eden project. So the Eden project down, like the kind of real Eden project, or the first Eden project in Cornwall, has been drilling geothermal wells to provide heating for the facility, or for the kind of main biome complex. And so that project is still ongoing, but now they're talking about this Eden North. So this is coming, this is a rendering. It's not open yet, but when it does, they will be incorporating, they might be. They're considering to include geothermal heat in the same way as Eden South. And then this is such a beautiful example, and this is really where I hope the country goes. This is where a village has made the decision. They got some funding a few years ago, and it did take a few years for them to get here, but they have this energy center that has a geothermal heat pump and bless you, and combined with a solar farm and I think an air source heat pump as well. But they're providing heat to the 300 homes, 2 churches, 1 pub, and 1 school. And they have, not all of those have received the heating yet. It's kind of a ramp up, but it's working. And this is the type of thing that, well, I guess it resonates with me because this is the kind of village I live in. Everyone has heating oil, big old tank outside. It's really expensive. The gas lines don't go there. And so there's no other option. So having a energy center that is able to get the buy-in of the residents and decarbonizing, this is the real opportunity. And, we have the net zero goals. Everyone, we've said these things are okay. The government has said all buildings need to be decarbonized by 2050. How are we going to do that? And when you look at the emissions and just heating in general, most of I think it's 40% of the emissions in the UK come from heating buildings. And so that's the real opportunity here. So I've spoken about what we've seen, the signs of life. What we don't see is bold legislation in the way that we see in our neighboring countries over on the continent. And also, nobody knows about it still. You mentioned geothermal and people don't know what it is. And somehow that needs to change. But we've had a success story in the past, and that's with the UK offshore wind. And this story, what happened was it started out quite slow, but then as soon as the government got involved and had some government and industry collaboration, the turbines got bigger, the projects got bigger, it grew exponentially, and the price came down over time, and the jobs went over there, and it's just a great story. So it's totally possible to do this, but it just does take a little something extra, and the government involvement is really important. So what I see in these signs of life is there's something around place, actually, because geothermal energy, heat and power, for that matter, but it's really specific to the piece of earth that you're standing on. And technology and solutions today, you can make anything work. You actually don't need to be standing on steamy ground in order to make it work for you. And so I say nations rally. It's because we're seeing the Scottish government agree to have a map of the mine water. We're seeing Wales do the same thing. Northern Ireland has a very strong geothermal plan and actions and activity there. England it's like not so much. So there's that. It's everything to do with the place on earth where you live and the communities and the people right there. That's different from mining, hydrocarbons, even water, because you can transport those, they're commodities, but actually heat for people on the ground is different. So it's interesting anyway. And then this trend around existing assets. There's no appetite to drill new holes. And there's a lot of public mistrust of anything with heavy machinery poking holes in the ground. So I think that making use of what we have, the whole mine water story and the repurposing well story, that's something that has the potential to really get hold and take off in this country. And then also this converging sectors, the hydrocarbon oil and gas industry and the mining industry and the environmental water industry, pollution and the kind of science and publications and research and businesses that go into caring about and measuring water. That's a totally different sector. And geothermal brings all of that together. And it's just a really interesting and exciting time that we can, have the excuse to come out of silos and come together to, decarbonize and use this renewable energy. So opportunities in the UK, we really don't need power. We have that with the offshore. I mean, we need power, but we don't need we don't need to look to geothermal energy for a source of power. And I say that because I know from working with GeothermEx that you have to have really high temperatures to make that viable. And as we saw in the Lindal diagram, you don't need high temperatures to make good use of geothermal heat. So it's all about heat in my eyes. And then also, like the BGS, I mentioned that they're going through their legacy data. That's exactly what needs to happen. We have huge amounts of data about the subsurface, about the oil and gas wells. And what needs to happen is just to access those and look at them differently. I'm involved right now in a project in Oman where we're doing a countrywide geothermal assessment. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're pulling all of their oil and gas well logs and looking at them differently, looking at them for water reservoir properties, not hydrocarbon reservoir properties. And that's a whole, almost a new field of study, because it requires going back to kind of first principles and really looking at things with fresh eyes. Super interesting. And then also this cross-pollination between the different sectors. I think of it because this is a picture of a drone measuring the resistivity. Okay, it's a rendering, it's not actually real, but the kind of tools and technologies and even units of measurement and vocabulary that the mining sector has is different to that of hydrocarbon, is different to that of the water hydrology, and the tools are different too. So it's just we have a lot to learn from each other, I guess, is the sense I have there, and a great opportunity. So there's hope. There's loads of signs of life. We know that we can spin things up in the UK, like we did in offshore wind. There is this all-party parliamentary group that's being formed for geothermal. There's probably people in this room who are, thinking of joining that group. If you don't know about it, speak to me afterwards. And so that's starting to go, and that's like the proper way of doing things with the parliament and government. At the same time, we're in this really interesting space of this, what feels like quite a national identity crisis and confidence crisis. We have Brexit, and the different nations of the British Isles want to, there's talk about splitting up, and and then we have the high prices, and there's a lot of things that don't feel like they're working particularly well. And I think that there's really an appetite to fix that, or an appetite for bold change, as I say. We still have the situation where nobody knows about geothermal yet. And I had an idea the other day, which is Clarkson's Farm. I think if we could get Clarkson's Farm, if anyone knows the producer or has contacts in the world, so if we could get a season going where he converts his farm to, renewable energy and is able to get geothermal going. I mean, look, I don't know who else has been watching Clarkson's Farm, but I learned so much about farming watching that. I didn't know anything. And so anyway, call me or talk to me afterwards if you know the producer of Clarkson. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the lights.